Welcome to the Burnie Thompson Show.
A very engaging guy with a great sense of humor.
America's voice of freedom.
And a touch of razzle-dazzle.
You think the EPA has rights?
Yeah, to protect the environment.
Where does it get rights?
Where does it get rights?
Yeah, where do rights come from?
From the American government.
You big dummy.
Here's the danger. If you believe that human beings can give rights, then human beings can do what else? Take them away.
Man, he's got to be crazy.
Hey, Mr. Thompson, what's it like to be demented?
No.
Cut me a little slack here, will you?
Burnie Thompson.
I am excited. We're about to talk to the Florida 10th Amendment Center with Francisco Rodriguez. And a couple years ago, in 2010, I told you that if we just voted for the right people, we just sent the right people to the U.S. House of Reprehensibles. If we got these guys in, the Alan West, the Steve Sutherlands, we send in the Congressman Yohos, we send these guys in there, boy, they're going to do the right thing. And the Congress and the Supreme Court, this is what I said in 2010, are going to stand against, they're going to check the president, the executive branch. And we will restore this republic and regain our liberty. I was wrong. Instead, what they did was they colluded against the people, and they said since all three branches agree, that makes something constitutional, whether it's Obamacare or federal gun laws that infringe our right to keep and bear arms. The federal government is out of control. The federal government, in my opinion, no longer exists to protect the rights God gave us. Instead, it is a threat to the rights. It violates the rights God gave us. That means it is alter or abolish time. And we have the right and duty to do that according to the Declaration of Independence. And so no longer do I tell you if we just vote for the right federal officials, things will be okay. Forget the federal government. They can go take a flying leap. Now it is up to states to pass state laws through the legislature and governors that say we will not fund or support anti-constitutional federal laws. And what are anti-constitutional federal laws? They are any law, any act, rather, that the Congress passes, the president signs, the Supreme Court opines is okay. A federal law that is not pursuant to the Constitution, according to Article 6, is null and void, and states should say we will not support it, we will not enforce it, we will not fund it. And now a representative in Florida by the name of Dane Eagle and a companion senator in the state of Florida are working on a Second Amendment Preservation Act where the state of Florida tells the federal government we will not enforce your anti-constitutional federal laws, past, present, or future. It's a big deal. Arizona is now on board. States across the country are on board. And part of the reason this is becoming better known as a strategy to stand athwart the federal government and yell stop is because of 10th Amendment centers across the country. And in Florida, we have a 10th Amendment center. And let's remember the 10th Amendment says powers not delegated to the United States, the federal government, by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states. Those powers are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. 10th Amendment centers across the country are restoring power and rights back to the people and the states. And I am thrilled to introduce to you Francisco Rodriguez of the Florida 10th Amendment Center. Francisco, how are you?
I'm doing fantastic, Bernie. Thank you for having me on the show.
Delighted to have you on. And I just now posted on our show page, the Burnie Thompson Show, that I'm about to talk with the 10th Amendment Center about the Sunshine State nullifying federal gun laws. And I recommend to everybody to like your Facebook page because you guys are doing great work, Francisco. Tell us what your mission is.
Well, the mission of the Florida 10th Amendment Center, along with all of our sister chapters and the national movement, is really to oppose federal laws. And our motto is the Constitution, every issue, every time, no exceptions, no excuses. So that's our direct mission.
I love it. And what about you, Francisco? What do you do, and how did you become interested in in basically standing for the supreme law of the land against a federal government that's violating it?
So my story starts back in 1995. I was 15 years old, and I read a book by Frederick Bastiat called The Law. It was we were going to talk about it in class at my Christian school in Jupiter, Florida, but we weren't required to read it. But as I started, glancing at it during class, I decided to take a copy home. Our teacher had about 30 copies. Took a copy home, couldn't put it down, and it really, the law really released inside of me the ideas that I couldn't verbalize. And Bastiat wrote it in the 1850s when he was dealing with the Second French Revolution. He was a political philosopher, but he also was he was also a statesman. He ran for office and won. And what he dealt with there was the idea that we are not a compilation of groups, but what government does is attempt to divide us up into groups, and it removes power from the individual. Because if you can give groups power, then you can begin to deliberately remove power from the individual, and that really resonated with me as a young man. And so since then, I've taught classes on the Constitution. I ran for office in 2010, and then Andrew Nappy asked me to join the 10th Amendment Center. He's the state director. I'm the outreach director, and together we've been working for the past. He's been working for about 5 years now, just over that, and I've been helping him since 2010 after losing my election for the state legislature. I've been helping him out, and we're doing some work with another friend, T.J. Riordan, in Tampa. So it's the three of us in Florida 10th Amendment Center, along with a lot of grassroots people.
Well, Francisco, you're going to love this because you just found a kindred spirit. I always recommend The Law, which really could be titled The Government, because it's a study of the proper relationship between free people and government. It is the very first book I recommend on everybody's Liberty Library. My favorite copy of it is only 55 pages long. And one of my favorite quotes off the top of my head is when Bastiat said that government is that great fiction whereby some people try to live off of everybody else.
Yep.
And the great lesson that Bastiat taught me was not only to look at what is seen, but look at what is not seen. Like when you look at Spain and the Green Jobs program, it's perfect. They said, look, we created jobs. Yes, but for every one job you created, you lost 2.3 in the real economy. What is seen and not seen. I am so excited to meet somebody who don't you agree, Francisco, that for anybody who hasn't read that book, it's a simple book to read. It was really like a pamphlet back in the day, that it will enrich your life and you will no longer be bamboozled by the bamboozlers.
It will completely enrich your life, and to be honest, you will have to reread it probably a few times just to appreciate it, but a few sections are highly valuable for just clarifying all the noise that's out there in politics, and there's a lot of noise. So it really helped me. As a young man, you have kind of an undisciplined mind. You think, let me chase after everything. But it really helped discipline my mind to be focused on really opposing and directly opposing the power of government where it has taken power that doesn't belong to it.
And what I love about and the book we're talking about, if you want to get it, it's called The Law by Frederick Bastiat, Bastiat. And again, the first book I recommend on everybody's Liberty Library. I look at that book as almost three sections, Francisco. The very beginning is phenomenal. The middle of it gets a little bit historical, and if you're not up on your French history, which I wasn't, you kind of go through that part. But the last 30 pages, I felt like I was underlining every sentence.
Yes.
Isn't it amazing?
Well, I posted Bastiat.org actually has it for free online. It's about 30 pages printed out on a Word document, and it also has what is seen and what is unseen. That was one of his other books. So it has a couple of different books that he's written in different languages, and it's a free resource that I send to friends. And of course, a printed copy is nice to have, but for those of you that prefer like an e-copy, this one's fantastic. I've enjoyed it.
Well, I'll tell you what. I mean,
how I started.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just saying that's how I started what I call my entrance into the Liberty universe.
Well, I love it. I've got a Liberty Library. You've got a Liberty universe. You think bigger than I do. But I'll tell you this, Francisco. You are a treasure. I just met you, but you're a treasure. I'll tell you why. It is rare that I meet people who have the philosophical foundation based on such great work as Frederick Bastiat. Henry Hazlitt wrote a book a little bit later that built on the economics of it. But, man, I am so proud to meet you, and I'm so proud of what you guys are doing at the Florida 10th Amendment Center. I promise you this show will be your ally to propel the Second Amendment Preservation Act launched by Representative Dane Eagle. We will help you. As a matter of fact, we are the folks that linked arms and made the ground rumble in Tallahassee and came to the defense of the Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association. Sheriff of the Year, Nick Finch, Sheriff Nick Finch of Liberty County. If you're not familiar with him, he will help you as well. So, and I know this. I know that organization has recently come out in favor of the Second Amendment Preservation Act with Sheriff Mack.
They have. They just endorsed it last Friday, and it was really, Representative Eagle filed it and obviously sponsored it on Monday, and we just saw a barrage of activity. The interesting things that we saw kind of an unprecedented amount of House co-sponsors to the point where we haven't seen anything similar to that at such an early stage in legislative history.
That is so fantastic, because I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to smoke out the pragmatic Republicans from the Second Amendment constitutional conservatives. We're going to find out now if they're going to put their signature where their mouth is.
Bernie, you're reading our mind. I love it. That's great.
Well, we're going to do it, and we're going to name them, Francisco. We're going to put pressure on these people. Well,
I think it's fantastic. And you mentioned that we're working with the Senate. We're going to find out this afternoon if there's a senator that's strong enough to actually sponsor the bill, because right now there are questions about that.
I thought there was a companion bill in the Senate.
There's a companion bill that's in draft currently.
Okay.
But it has not been officially filed and sponsored. Because it's in draft, we still have time. So I know that there are some people that have been concerned about whether we have time because we haven't officially gotten this sponsored in the Senate, and because we had a great senator support us. He has a lot of other liberty legislation that he's focused on right now. So he hasn't committed to this piece, but he says I want to make sure it has the opportunity. So he filed as a draft.
And what is his name?
I want to make sure that he has an opportunity to get back to us. So I'll hold off on his name, but he was very helpful to us.
Fair enough. Well, we will help you as well. As I said, I really want to ally ourselves with you. And as a matter of fact, we've got to take a very quick break. But when we do, I want to get into the details of what the Second Amendment Preservation Act does, because there's a very specific strategy going around the country where states are learning how they can not comply, but rather nullify anti-constitutional federal acts. And for people who say, well, who are you to say what's an anti-constitutional federal act? Well, I just opened the supreme law of the land itself. Article 6 states very clearly the Constitution is the supreme law of the land, and all laws must be pursuant to it. If a law violates or contradicts the supreme law of the land, it is no law at all. It is null and void. And when we get back, I'd like for you to explain what the Second Amendment Preservation Act does in Florida. We are with Francisco Rodriguez of the Florida 10th Amendment Center. This is a great day. We'll be right back.
You're listening to The Burnie Thompson Show. Email Burnie at myfreedomradio.com. This is The Burnie Thompson Show, your 21st century town hall.
Let's get back with Francisco Rodriguez, the outreach director for the Florida 10th Amendment Center. One of their top priorities, if not the top priority, is to advance or help promote a bill filed in the Florida legislature by Representative Dane Eagle called the Second Amendment Preservation Act that would essentially nullify all past, present, and future federal gun control laws by telling the state that we're just not going to fund it. Welcome back, Francisco. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Bernie. I'm excited about this portion of the show.
Thank you. Would you say that this is pretty much your guys' top priority, this particular bill?
This particular bill is our top priority for Florida, absolutely. And it's among the top priorities for the national really promote. So I think you probably received, I saw your post on your Facebook, and you probably received a national notice about the endorsement from Sheriff Mack and the peace officers. And so this is a top priority for us, and among the top for the national group. So we're excited about it.
Well, you know what I've been communicating during the break. I don't know if you are familiar with Sheriff Nick Finch. Have you heard of Sheriff Nick Finch from Liberty County?
Yes, I've heard of Sheriff Finch.
He has been named the national, just last week, he was in, Sheriff Mack named him the National Constitutional Sheriff of the Year, and he's in Liberty County, the smallest county in Florida. It's not too far from Tallahassee. He's going to join us in the next segment. If you can stick around a little bit longer, I want you two to know each other because he also can be a great ally for you. He's one of the top Second Amendment sheriffs in the country.
Well, thank you, Brian. I'll stay on as long as I can. I want to be a part of the show as long as I can, especially on this subject. I will let you know if I can stay on past an hour, but I'll do the best I can.
All right. Well, we've got till the top of the hour, and then the show ends for us. But right now, I've got 2 minutes before the next break. Tell us what the nuts and bolts of the Second Amendment Preservation Act in the state of Florida is.
The Second Amendment Preservation Act bans the state of Florida from helping the federal government enforce federal acts regarding personal firearms and accessories that violate the Second Amendment. And so, essentially, the Second Amendment says shall not be infringed, and that has a very clear definition according to the authors of that. The way in which we stop participating, what we've found just in some initial research is about 7 out of 10 actions by the federal government to enforce laws that violate the Second Amendment require state resources or local resources for that enforcement. So ATF will contact the county or the local sheriff, utilize county and local jails to hold the person that is violating their unconstitutional law. And so if we refuse to comply, it's a doctrine called the anti-commandeering doctrine, and our focus is not to directly go against the federal government, but say, you enforce it yourself. And 3 out of 10, possibly, I think it'll be much less, but 3 out of 10 times might be their best effort. I think we've seen some examples where it's actually significantly less than that. Without the help of the state, the federal government cannot effectively enforce its laws. And James Madison said this in Federalist 46, refusal to comply with officers of the Union will make their laws nearly impossible to enforce.
That's great. I had never heard the term anti-commandeering doctrine. And again, this is not states saying, hey, let's bring it on, let's go to war. This is states saying, look, we're just not going to use our funds and resources to enforce this. And it is a doctrine that has really swept the United States. I've only become familiar with it this year.
Well, it's one that we're using for most nullification action in the movement since 2006 when Michael started the 10th Amendment Center.
Francisco, hang on. The satellite is swooping in to carry me away. Short break. When we get back, I want to know so much more, and you're going to meet Sheriff Nick Finch.
This is the Burnie Thompson Show.
Is this how you start off conversations? Do you start with people all day long saying, you don't make sense and shut up?
Why so serious?
I'm with you guys 100%. I really am.
A man of my word.
I'm a joker, I'm a smoker, I'm a midnight toker. I sure don't want to hurt no one.
You're listening to the Burnie Thompson Show. Conversation you can't ignore.
And here we go.
If you're fed up with the federal government getting in our business and putting up obstacle courses to our pursuits of happiness and encroaching into our rights that are guaranteed in the supreme law of the land, the Constitution, if you're fed up with the federal government, you're with the right crowd today, I'll tell you that. There is a movement afoot across the United States where individual states are telling the federal government this: we will not resist, but we refuse to assist. That's essentially what it is. States are saying, we're not going to resist, but we refuse to assist. And it is known as the commandeering doctrine, I just learned, from Francisco Rodriguez with the 10th Amendment, with the Florida's 10th Amendment Center. And that is what we're hoping to do here in the state of Florida with regard to anti-constitutional federal gun laws. And so I want to get Francisco back with us. Hey, Francisco, thanks for being
Bernie.
back with us. I want to make sure I use the phones right. I want to introduce you to somebody, though, and it is Sheriff Nick Finch of Liberty County, the Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association Sheriff of the Year, one of the greatest Second Amendment supporting sheriffs in the entire country. Sheriff Finch, meet Francisco Rodriguez, who's supporting and promoting the Florida's Second Amendment Preservation Act.
Hey, Francisco, how are you today?
Doing well, Sheriff Finch. How are you?
I'm doing good, my friend. Doing good.
Thank you to your organization. That we had Sheriff Mack and the peace officer, the Constitutional Sheriff and Peace Officers Association. They gave a great endorsement last Friday of the Florida Second Amendment Preservation Act, and we really appreciate that.
Oh yeah, the CSPOA. It's a great organization. We had a meeting out in Las Vegas last weekend, and there were probably, I don't know, Mac probably knows the number, I'm guessing between 40 and 50 sheriffs from all across the country that have signed on. Plus there was a legislator from Utah, and I mean chiefs of police. In fact, I'd just seen some flap about a chief of police from New Mexico that was actually there that has found himself on the wrong side of the issue, I guess, in New Mexico. Hopefully his case will come out good. I think I just heard that they might be trying to backpedal now and reinstate him back to his rightful position.
Yeah, TSA harassed him when he said he was returning from that organization. It's quite a story. As a matter of fact, the Peacekeepers, Torch, Joe Metz has been telling me a little bit about that. But Sheriff Finch, Francisco, when Sheriff Finch stood trial about probably, 6 weeks ago maybe, he was facing state attorneys who were challenging him on Second Amendment rights. What happened was there was a citizen, a resident of Liberty County up in the National Forest, driving around with a small pistol in his pocket in his vehicle. And a disgruntled deputy pulled the guy over, told the guy to get out of his car, and then charged him with carrying a concealed handgun after he got out of his car. Sheriff Finch wasn't having it. And this turned into a big ordeal, but in the trial, this is a quote from Sheriff Finch to the assistant state attorney. He says, at some point, Jack Campbell, at some point, the Constitution has to stand for something. Now, don't we need more sheriffs like that, Francisco?
We definitely need to focus on the federal government violating the Second Amendment, and the Constitution is very clear. And the Constitutional Sheriffs Association, I was going to mention this right at the beginning of the show when you were talking about people's attention on Washington, D.C., and I think that if you broke down did an audit of your day and how much time, as an individual, and said, how much time am I spending focusing on D.C., how much time am I focusing on the state, and how much time am I spending focusing on the local law enforcement and local elected officials, if we would completely turn upside down the focus of our attention to be more frequently engaged on a daily basis with or on at least a weekly basis with our local law enforcement, the constitutional sheriff, the local elected officials, on a quarterly basis or maybe a little bit more frequently with the state legislature and very infrequently with the national government, we might see a transition from the federal government taking more power because no one's paying attention to them anymore. And so the work of constitutional sheriffs is really the heart. I wrote a book called The Neighborhood Project where we focus on those local offices that no one's touching, and the more constitutional sheriffs we have, the greater foundation we build for localizing liberty.
Francisco, tell Sheriff Finch what your motto is at the 10th Amendment Center.
The Constitution, every issue, every time, no exceptions, no excuses.
Isn't that
I
great?
like that motto.
Well, Sheriff Finch, I just wanted to introduce the two of you. I know you stepped out of a meeting to do this, and as always, we appreciate it so much. But I just knew that, Sheriff Finch, you needed to know about the Florida 10th Amendment Center and vice versa, because I think the more of us who link arms, the more likely the legislatures are going to do the right thing, because if we leave it up to their own consciences, you know where that's going to go.
Absolutely, Bernie. I think you're right. And just before I get off here, I want to talk a little bit about the state legislator. I just saw on your website that we have a state legislator actually that's introduced legislation that will make the federal law null and void. So, we need to get behind this guy and help him out. And I need to get with you after the show, Bernie,
sure,
and get his contact information. And I'll be willing to help him in any way I can. So,
Representative Dane Eagle, and that's actually the Florida 10th Amendment Center's number one priority, is to get that legislation passed.
Yeah, and I'm on board. I'll do what I can. Again, thank you for the invite. It was a pleasure meeting you, and we'll talk soon.
Great to meet you, Sheriff Finch.
Thanks,
Great
Sheriff.
To meet you too. Thanks, Bernie.
All right, I'll talk to you soon. You just needed to know him. He's going to be a great ally. I also, in Bay County, we have a sheriff too, Sheriff Frank McKeithen, who I know will support these kinds of efforts. But let me ask you this, Francisco. What are the objections to this? Already the scare tactics are coming out, aren't they?
They are.
Tell me what the scare tactics are. We can't allow this, or else what will happen?
Well, we won't be able to. We won't be able to have background checks for Florida. We won't be able to use higher-powered weapons. We won't be able to do, a number of things. And we're putting together a response to that. We'll hopefully have that in a paper soon. We're working with Representative Eagle on that. But they're really based on the anti-commandeering doctrine. These are really not an issue. The first one, with regard to will we be able to have background checks? Well, that's regarding the Brady Act and the NICS program, NICS, and the Florida is one of 13 states to have developed a internal process for handling the background checks. But all that would need to be done is for gun shop owners to go directly to the FBI. They could go directly. They're not prohibited by this law. We don't want to encourage that, but that's at the very least, it's not going to affect local law enforcement, and it won't affect the state, because it just essentially removes the burden on the state to go through the state to get to the FBI, and then we have some other concerns around future legislation. So do we want to have past, present, and future in our bill? And we really do, because the question really resides around do we want the federal government developing a database of gun owners, and we want to avoid that. And so those are the two major objections that we've seen. We have clear responses to that, really well thought out, that we'll be providing real soon. But the concern is, well, are we really against all federal gun laws? And the answer has to be yes. We have to believe, as citizens of the United States and really citizens of Florida, that the federal government making a gun law is going to be in opposition to liberty.
And you know what? If you're interested, Francisco, I would be very, very interested, and I'll tell you, we can talk offline about this more, about helping you with the messaging on this, with the responses on this, because I can already imagine what the objections are if the state of Florida nullifies federal gun laws. They're going to say, oh, my God, there's going to be no background checks. Oh, my God, we're going to have automatic weapons. There won't be any common sense regulations. What about the mental health requirement? We're going to have schizophrenics with guns. There'll be open carry. There'll be guns in schools. They're going to throw them all at us, and we better have very, very quick, strong, snappy answers that resonate with people. It's very important that we can overcome that. You know, one of the things, one of the best answers right off the top of my head is, you've given me all these scare tactics, but compared to what? That's not nearly as scary to me as the federal government and what they are doing with these databases on the pretext of mental health requirements. It's outrageous, but I would love to help you with the messaging in that if you're interested.
I appreciate it. We will take all the help we can get. We'll have an op-ed piece ready, but I think distilling it down to more concise communication is vital, because people, nothing against individual people, but we're typically running scared from the federal government instead of looking towards very focused towards liberty, and if that was our focus, I think that fear would really be opposed by power, love, and a sound mind, as they might say. And so our fear is causing us to be distracted, so we have no power, we have no love, we don't know what to hold on to, and we have no sound mind. So I think the better we can focus people, the more we'll create a passion for ideas of anti-commandeering or non-compliance.
And you can only love that which you truly understand. And
absolutely.
And we have to understand what the Constitution does. For those who would object to us nullifying federal laws, I think one of our first questions ought to echo what James Madison one time said. Can you lay your finger on that article of the Constitution that actually gives the government the power to do this? Because if you can't, it does not have the power. And the Supremacy Clause is another one of your great allies, because if an act or a bill is passed into law and it is not pursuant to the Constitution, and if it contradicts the Second Amendment, it is null and void. It is an interesting conversation whether or not the federal government ought to have these policies, but that's secondary. First, you must show us where they have the authority.
Well, the Supremacy Clause is usually something that people throw at us to oppose right. The 10th Amendment, and essentially you read it right. They take it out of context. They take one piece and they forget pursuant thereof, which is in pursuance to the rest of the Constitution. You can't have a law that violates the Constitution. Otherwise, why did we write the document in the first place? But more important, that's key. But even more importantly, Madison, also said that we as states are the ones that defined the adoption of the Constitution. The states, if you read the ratifying conventions, they said if at any time the federal government chooses to violate anything, you're not required to comply. You're not required to participate. And that started way back in 1798, only 7 years after the ratification of the Constitution. 1798, the Alien and Sedition Acts. Jefferson and Madison, for the Kentucky and Virginia resolutions, said we will not comply with these laws that violate our First Amendment. Yeah,
the 10th Amendment and the Supremacy Clause go hand in hand. They support each other. They don't contradict each other. And anybody who tries to say that the Supremacy Clause says that the federal government is supreme over the states is supporting Frankenstein's monster. Here's how I look at it. The states are like Dr. Frankenstein. They created this thing. And then what happened is this thing got up and started roaming the countryside and took that little girl and threw her in the lake. So the states created the monster. The states created it. The monster does not subjugate the states, is not supreme over the states. We created it. At the very most, it's a contract. It's a handshake between the states and the federal government. But the federal government is like Frankenstein's monster. It has become a problem, and I think it's time for us to chase it up into that windmill and send it back.
Well, I think we can send it back, and we can. The way that some people are, we talked about working out of fear, or you mentioned at the beginning of the show working in Washington, but really the way that you oppose power is with an equal or greater power, and so we have to realize that the states have a greater power, and their power is through noncompliance. And that is the most effective way to oppose it. I'll give you a great example. The Obamacare legislation wants states to expand Medicaid. Well, a number of states aren't. And if all states avoided the expanding of Medicaid and said, you're going to be responsible, federal government, for enforcing this, and then these young people refuse to comply with officers of the union. They don't have to sign up. You're not required to sign up. You might face a penalty, but you begin to take these action steps on a state and on a local and on a personal level. And what you find is that the power lies with the individual, and the power then is transferred to the states. And those states, so you're using power, a decentralized power, to oppose a centralized government. And so we have to fight power with equal or greater power, and we have to realize where that power.
What I like to say is that what we could do is fight power with rights, because rights are supreme over power, and only human beings have rights. Because as stated in the Declaration of Independence, let's start the story at the beginning. We were created, and the same God, as Thomas Jefferson said, who gave us liberty, who gave us our life, gave us liberty at the same time. So God gives us rights, and then we, to protect what God gave us, which is supreme, We created government, and we gave government power. The government has no right at all. We can't give government rights because we're not the Lord. So I think we should fight power with rights. As a matter of fact, Sun Tzu would like to say, The Art of War, if you don't know yourself, but you know your adversary, you're going to lose a lot of battles. If you know yourself but don't know your adversary, you're going to win some. But you know what? If you know yourself, your states, and you know your adversary, the federal government, if you know both, you can win just about every battle. And rights are supreme over the powers we delegated the federal government. Francisco, I have to take a very quick break, and when we come back, I just want people to know a little bit more about the 10th Amendment Center and how they can reach you and follow and support what we're doing. Hang tight. Francisco Rodriguez with the Florida 10th Amendment Center. We'll be right back.
You're listening to The Burnie Thompson Show. Catch The Burnie Thompson Show online at myfreedomradio.com. He's America's voice of freedom. Direct from the Liberty Lounge, Burnie Thompson.
On the radio. On the radio.
Francisco Rodriguez with the Florida 10th Amendment Center. Thank you for being with us. We only have about a minute. I'm going to make a copy of this entire interview, and I'm going to get it to you. Do what you want with it. But let's make this as Winston Churchill said, not the beginning of the end, but the end of the beginning. Let's work together toward this goal.
Sounds great, Bernie. Thank you for having me on. I know you wanted to hear how people can engage with the Florida 10th Amendment Center, and I posted 3 web links onto the place where you have it on your Facebook page.
Great.
And the first one is fltac.org, and we have a lot of action items there. We have some around Common Core, but mainly we're focused right now on the Second Amendment Preservation Act. If you want blog posts regarding the 10th Amendment Center, and we also upload our action steps, florida.10thamendmentcenter.com. And then the National is constantly putting new information about national bills, but also very solid philosophy, and that's 10thamendmentcenter.com. We are working with our friends across the country, but our focus for Florida 10th Amendment Center is right here in our state. I think that if we can take back our communities and neighborhoods, then our counties, then our state, then the federal government will be irrelevant.
Francisco, we'll do it soon. Thanks so much, Florida 10th Amendment Center. You can hear this, you can see all this at myfreedomradio.com. I'm Burnie Thompson. Thanks for listening. See you tomorrow.